Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
A book that really needs no introduction.
I mean, who hasn't heard of it? But have you actually read it?
Well, that's what we're here for, right? To give you the Spark Notes version, the Cliff Notes, I guess.
Exactly, so you can impress your friends at parties with all your Covey knowledge without actually having to crack open the book.
But hey, if you do feel inspired to pick it up after this deep dive, we've got you covered. We'll be referencing both the book and the workbook.
The workbook is key because it's got all these practical exercises and self-assessments so you can really put the 7 habits into practice.
All right, so before we dive into the habits themselves, let's set the stage a bit. Who was Stephen Covey anyway?
Yeah, like why should we even listen to this guy?
Well, Covey was kind of a big deal. He was an educator, author, businessman, and super popular speaker.
Kind of like a rock star of personal development, right?
Exactly. He dedicated his life to understanding what makes people and organizations truly effective.
And he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He founded the Covey Leadership Center, which later became Franklin Covey.
Yeah, Franklin Covey, a global performance improvement powerhouse.
So we're not just dealing with some abstract theories here. This stuff is tried and tested and has helped millions of people achieve real results.
And it all starts with this idea of paradigms.
Paradigms.
Uh,
It sounds a little bit out there, doesn't it?
well, think of it this way. A paradigm is basically a way of seeing the world, a lens through which you interpret everything.
Okay, so it's like those glasses they give you at the 3D movies.
Hmm.
It changes how you see things.
Exactly. And Covey argues that we don't see the world as it is, but as we are through our own unique paradigms.
So our experiences, beliefs, and assumptions, they all color how we see things.
And sometimes those paradigms can hold us back. They can prevent us from seeing things clearly or understanding other people's perspectives.
Covey actually uses this brilliant anecdote to illustrate this point. It's the story of a store manager and a salesperson.
Oh, yeah, the rain story.
Exactly. So picture this. A customer walks into a store,
And she asks for something.
and the salesperson, kind of shrugs it off. Just says, nope, we're all out. And that doesn't look like we'll be getting any anytime soon.
Manager is mortified, right? He overhears this and rushes over to the customer as she's leaving, trying to smooth things over.
It's like, don't worry, we can order for you. We'll get it for you ASAP.
But the customer, she just looks at him strangely and walks out.
So the manager is completely confused, and he scolds the salesperson. Never tell the customer we don't have something. Tell them it's on order.
And the salesperson is like, but she wanted rain.
Rain.
Oh,
I get it. The manager was operating under the paradigm that the customer wanted some physical product, but the salesperson understood that the customer's need was actually something else entirely.
right. She wanted it to rain. She didn't want like a rain boot or an umbrella.
This story is such a great example of how our paradigms can literally shape our reality. We see what we expect to see, and we miss what doesn't fit into our preconceived notions.
Exactly. And that's why self-awareness is so important. Covey says that once we recognize our own paradigms, we can start to question them, challenge them, and ultimately we can choose to shift them if they're not serving us well.
That's so empowering. It means we're not just stuck with the way we see things, we have the power to change our perceptions and in turn, change our reality.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key concept: principles.
Okay, principles like what? Honesty, integrity, that sort of thing.
Yeah, those are great examples. Covey describes principles as natural laws or fundamental truths that govern effectiveness. Think of them as the bedrock upon which lasting success is built.
Okay, so these principles are like the unwavering constants in a world that's constantly changing.
Exactly. And they apply to all areas of life, from our personal relationships to our careers to our communities.
All right, I'm with you so far. But how do we actually put these principles into practice? Like, how do we live by them day in and day out?
Well, that's where the 7 habits come in. But before we jump into those, I think it's helpful to understand another key concept that Covey introduces. He calls it the PPC balance.
The PPC balance. What's that all about?
He uses the simple but powerful analogy, the fable of the goose and the golden egg.
Oh, I remember that one. The farmer gets greedy and kills the goose, thinking he'll get all the golden eggs at once.
But of course, there are no more eggs. He's destroyed the very thing that was producing the results he wanted.
So what's the connection to principles and effectiveness?
Well, Covey uses this story to illustrate the balance between producing results, the golden eggs, and maintaining the ability to produce those results, the goose. He calls this the PPC balance, where P stands for production and PC stands for production capability.
So it's not just about getting things done. It's about making sure we can keep getting things done in the long run.
Precisely. And this applies to everything, like your health. You can push yourself to the limit in the short term, but if you don't take care of your body, eventually you'll burn out.
Or in a business context, you might be tempted to cut corners to boost profits. But if you sacrifice quality or customer service, you'll damage your reputation and ultimately hurt your bottom line.
Exactly. It's about thinking long term and playing the infinite game, as Simon Sinek would say.
So nurture the goose, and you'll enjoy those golden eggs for a long time to come.
Exactly. And that brings us to the 7 habits themselves.
All right, let's get to the good stuff.
Mhm.
I'm ready to unlock the secrets of highly effective people.
Okay, but remember, these aren't just quick fixes or tricks. They're a set of interconnected principles that, when applied consistently, can lead to a more effective and fulfilling life.
Got it. No magic bullets here, just good old-fashioned principles and consistent effort.
You got it. So the first 3 habits, Covey calls them the private victory because they're all about mastering yourself, your habits, and your mindset.
Private victory. Interesting. So it's like you have to win the battle within yourself before you go out and conquer the world.
Exactly. It's about moving from dependence to independence.
Okay, so what are these first 3 habits that make up the private victory?
Habit 1, be proactive. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. And habit 3, put first things first.
All right. Sounds like a solid foundation for personal growth.
It really is. And then the next 3 habits move us from independence to interdependence, what Covey calls the public victory.
Public victory. So this is about how we interact with others and build strong relationships, right?
You got it. This stage involves habit 4, think win-win. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And habit 6, synergize.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these habits build upon each other. First, you master yourself, then you focus on building effective relationships with others.
Exactly. It's a natural progression.
And what about the final habit?
Habit 7 is all about continuous improvement. Covey calls it sharpen the saw.
Sharpen a saw. That sounds intriguing.
It's about taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually so you can continue to grow and develop throughout your life.
So it's like a reminder to invest in yourself, to keep learning and growing and renewing your energy.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you're the most important tool you have, and you need to keep that tool sharp and ready for action.
I love that. It's like that saying, take care of your body is the only place you have to live. But Covey takes it a step further by including all aspects of our being: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Right. It's a holistic approach to personal effectiveness.
Okay, so we've got the big picture. We've talked about paradigms, principles, the PPC balance, and we've even gotten a sneak peek at the 7 habits themselves.
But I think it's time to roll up our sleeves and really dive into some of these habits in more detail.
Okay, I'm game. Which one should we tackle first?
Let's start with habit 1, be proactive, because it really sets the foundation for everything else.
All right, let's do it. I've heard this phrase thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean to be proactive in the Covey sense?
It's about recognizing that you're not just reacting to the world around you, you have the power to choose your response.
So it's not just about being busy or taking initiative. It's about a fundamental shift in mindset.
Exactly. It's about recognizing your own agency and ability to choose how you respond to any given situation.
And this is where Covey introduces the idea of proactive versus reactive language.
Right. For instance, a reactive person might say, there's nothing I can do, while a proactive person would say, let's look at our options.
Wow, I can already see how simply shifting our language can make a huge difference in how we approach challenges.
Absolutely. And to further illustrate this point, Covey introduces the concept of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence.
Okay, 2 circles. What do they represent?
Imagine 2 concentric circles. The outer circle, that's your circle of concern, it includes all the things you might worry about, like global issues, political turmoil, personal problems, you name it.
Yeah, that outer circle is probably pretty crowded for most people.
Right. But the inner circle, the circle of influence, represents the things you can actually do something about. Proactive people focus their energy on their circle of influence.
So they take action on the things they can control, while reactive people tend to get bogged down in their circle of concern, worrying about things they can't change.
Exactly. And here's the interesting thing. When you focus on your circle of influence, it actually expands.
So it's like a positive feedback loop. The more you focus on what you can control, the more control you actually have.
You got it. And that leads to a sense of empowerment and agency, which in turn fuels more proactive behavior.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control how we respond.
And by focusing on our circle of influence, we actually increase our ability to make a difference.
Powerful stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've got be proactive covered. Now, what about habit 4? Think win-win.
This is a good one. It's about moving away from that competitive win-lose mindset and embracing a cooperative approach where everyone
Oh,
benefits.
I love this one. Collaboration over competition. Sign me up.
Right. It's about seeking solutions where everyone feels like they've gained something, fostering a sense of mutual respect and shared success. And Covey shares another great anecdote to illustrate this principle. It's the story of a father and his son.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So the father wants his son to help clean up their neighbor's yard, but the son isn't exactly thrilled about the idea.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Chores are not exactly a kid's idea of a good time.
Right, so instead of forcing him or resorting to punishment, the father decides to take a win-win approach.
Okay, how does he pull that off?
He starts by pointing out to his son how beautiful and well-maintained their neighbor's yard always looks, and asks his son how he thinks they keep it that way. The son, being a kid, guesses that they probably water it a lot.
Smart kid.
Right. So the father agrees and proposes a deal. He'll increase his son's allowance if he agrees to water the neighbor's yard twice a week.
Brilliant. Everyone wins in this scenario. The son gets more allowance, the neighbor gets a beautifully maintained yard without having to do the work, and the father gets his son to help out willingly, all while teaching him a valuable life lesson.
It's a perfect example of how a win-win mindset can transform a potentially frustrating situation into a positive experience for everyone involved.
This really highlights how win-win isn't just about big negotiations. It's a way of approaching life, a framework for collaboration that can be applied to all sorts of situations.
Absolutely. And while a win-win outcome may not always be possible, approaching interactions with that intention can make a world of difference.
Okay, we've covered paradigms, principles, the PPC balance, be proactive, and think win-win. My brain is buzzing with insights. Now, what about the workbook? What gems can we uncover there?
The workbook is like a treasure chest of practical tools and exercises. One that stands out is the time matrix.
The time matrix. I've seen this diagram before, but to be honest, I never really grasped its full significance.
Well, get ready for an aha moment. It's a visual representation of how we spend our time, divided into 4 quadrants.
Okay, 4 quadrants. Break it down for me.
So quadrant 1 is for things that are both urgent and important. Think crises, pressing deadlines, those putting out fires moments.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Quadrant 2 is where the magic happens. This is for things that are important but not urgent. Think long-term planning, relationship building, personal development, the things that are vital for effectiveness but often get neglected.
This is making me realize that I probably spend way too much time in quadrant 1, reacting to urgent demands, and not enough time in quadrant 2, proactively building a foundation for long-term success.
That's a common struggle, but Covey's framework helps us see that we need to make a conscious effort to prioritize those quadrant 2 activities, even when it feels like we don't have the time.
So it's about shifting our focus from urgency to importance.
Exactly. Now, quadrant 3 is all about things that are urgent but not important. Think interruptions, distractions, those tasks that feel pressing but don't actually contribute to your goals.
And finally, quadrant 4. That's got to be the fun one.
Quadrant 4 is the land of time wasters, mindless activities that are neither urgent nor important.
Oh, I know that quadrant all too well. Endless scrolling, binge watching.
We all have our guilty pleasures, but the time matrix helps us see how much time we're potentially wasting in quadrants 3 and 4.
Time that could be better spent on those quadrant 2 activities that truly move the needle.
Exactly. And another valuable tool from the workbook is the emotional bank account.
Okay, emotional bank account. This sounds interesting. Tell me more.
It's a metaphor Covey uses to describe the balance of trust and goodwill we build in our relationships.
So it's like a real bank account, but instead of money, we're depositing trust and goodwill.
Exactly. Acts of kindness, keeping promises, understanding perspectives, genuinely listening, these are deposits that build trust and strengthen relationships.
And on the flip side, breaking commitments, being disrespectful, or neglecting needs, those are withdrawals that deplete the account.
Precisely. And just like with a financial bank account, it's important to maintain a positive balance.
So when the account is full, there's a reserve of goodwill that allows the relationship to weather disagreements and challenges. But if the account is overdrawn, even small conflicts can cause major damage.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is to be mindful of the balance in our relationships.
It's about making consistent efforts to make deposits, small acts of kindness, sincere apologies, quality time, active listening. These all contribute to a healthy, thriving emotional bank account.
And that's a great segue into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore those public victory habits, the habits that help us build strong, interdependent relationships and achieve success together.
I'm ready for it. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back in a flash.
See you soon. Welcome back, everyone.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle the next set of habits, the public victory.
This is where things get really interesting because we're moving beyond personal effectiveness and into the realm of relationships and teamwork.
I'm all about teamwork. So
Okay.
remind me again, what are those public victory habits?
So we have habit 4, think win-win, habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and habit 6, synergize.
Okay, so these habits are all about how we interact with others and create those win-win situations we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And it all starts with understanding. That's habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward. Listen first, then talk. Right.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. Covey argues that most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. I'm already thinking about my response while the other person is still talking.
It's a common trap, but Covey challenges us to practice empathic listening.
Empathic listening, what's that?
It goes beyond just hearing the words. It's about truly seeking to understand the other person's perspective, their feelings, and the meaning behind their words.
So it's not just about listening with your ears. It's about listening with your heart and mind as well.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to their body language, tone of voice, and the emotions behind their words.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Like, give me some practical tips for becoming a more empathic listener.
Well, first, put away your phone, make eye contact, and really focus on what the other person is saying. Ask clarifying questions to make sure you're understanding them correctly, and paraphrase what you've heard to confirm your understanding.
Those are great tips. I think sometimes we're so afraid of awkward silences that we jump in with our own thoughts and opinions before the other person has even finished speaking.
It's about giving them the space to fully express themselves.
And then, once we've truly understood their perspective, that's when we can effectively communicate our own thoughts and feelings.
Precisely. And that's where the then to be understood part comes in.
So it's not about suppressing our own views or always agreeing with the other person. It's about creating a space for open and honest dialogue.
Where everyone feels heard and respected.
I love that. So empathic listening is all about seeking to understand first and then expressing ourselves clearly and respectfully. It's about building bridges instead of walls.
Exactly. And that leads us to habit 6, synergize.
Synergize. Now, that's a word you don't hear every day. What does it mean in the Covey sense?
It's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's about collaboration, creativity, and the power of teamwork.
Okay, I'm all about teamwork. But what does synergy actually look like in practice?
Covey uses the analogy of a team of rowers working in perfect harmony. Each individual contributes their unique skills and efforts, and the result is a boat that moves swiftly and powerfully toward its destination.
I love that analogy. It really captures the essence of synergy, that when people with different perspectives and strengths come together, they can create something truly extraordinary.
Exactly. And there are 3 key principles for achieving synergy. First, valuing differences. Recognizing that diverse perspectives and opinions can lead to better solutions.
It's like that saying, if two people think exactly alike, one of them is unnecessary.
Right. Synergy thrives on diversity of thought. Second is building trust. Create a safe space where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas without fear of judgment.
Yeah, that's so important. It's about fostering psychological safety so everyone feels empowered to contribute.
And finally, it's about moving beyond compromise.
Beyond compromise, what do you mean by that?
It's not about finding a middle ground. It's about finding what Covey calls the third alternative.
The third alternative.
A solution that is better than what either individual could have come up with on their own. It's about tapping into that collective wisdom and creativity of the group.
So it's not about one person winning and the other losing. It's about finding a solution that transcends both individual perspectives.
Exactly. It's about 1 + 1 we 3.
I love that. So synergy is all about leveraging the power of collaboration to achieve those 1 + 1 = 3 results.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we can achieve so much more when we work together than when we try to go it alone.
Okay, I'm feeling energized just thinking about all the possibilities. But before we move on to the final habit, I just wanted to touch on something that came up for me earlier. When we were talking about the emotional bank account,
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about how important it is to be mindful of the balance, not just in our personal relationships, but also in our professional lives.
Absolutely. That emotional bank account metaphor applies to all kinds of relationships, whether it's with your colleagues, your clients, or even your boss.
It's about making those deposits of trust and goodwill, because when the account is full, it makes everything run smoother.
Exactly. People are more willing to collaborate, to go the extra mile, to be flexible and understanding.
And on the flip side, when the account is overdrawn, every interaction feels like a struggle. There's a lack of trust, communication breaks down, and it becomes really difficult to get anything done.
It's like trying to row a boat with a hole in it. You're expending all this energy, but you're not really getting anywhere.
Perfect analogy. Okay, so the key takeaway here is to be mindful of the emotional bank account in all our interactions. Make those deposits of trust and goodwill, and it will pay off in spades.
Now, speaking of things that pay off, let's talk about the final habit. Habit 7, sharpen the saw. This one is all about self-renewal and continuous improvement.
Okay, sharpen the saw. I'm intrigued. What's the story behind this one?
Covey tells the story about a lumberjack who's trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw.
Ouch. That sounds like a recipe for frustration.
Right. It's exhausting, time-consuming, and the progress is painfully slow. But if he takes a few minutes to sharpen the saw, the work becomes much easier and more efficient.
Okay, so the saw is a metaphor for ourselves.
Exactly. Just like that saw needs regular sharpening, we need to invest in our own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being if we want to operate at our best.
So it's not about pushing ourselves to the limit and burning ourselves out. It's about taking care of ourselves so we can show up fully.
Absolutely, and sustainably. It's about creating that rhythm of renewal, making time for activities that nourish and replenish you.
Give me some examples. Like, what does sharpen the saw look like in real life?
Well, physically, it's about getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and exercising regularly. Mentally, it's about reading, learning new skills, being creative, and challenging yourself intellectually.
Okay, those are the obvious ones. But what about emotionally and spiritually?
Emotionally, it's about nurturing your relationships, practicing self-care, and processing your emotions in a healthy way. And spiritually, it's about connecting with something larger than yourself, whether it's through nature, meditation, prayer, or acts of service.
I love that. It's about taking care of the whole person, not just one dimension.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach to self-renewal. And remember, it's not about adding more to your to-do list. It's about making self-care a priority.
Yes, it's about shifting from I have to I get to.
Mm.
Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect.
And it's an investment in your long-term well-being. And remember, sharpen the saw is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice.
It's about creating that sustainable rhythm of renewal that allows us to continuously grow, learn, and evolve.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our exploration of the 7 habits.
Wow, I can't believe we covered all 7. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have, but hopefully we've given our listeners a taste of the transformative power of Covey's work and inspired them to do their own deep dive.
Absolutely. And remember, the 7 Habits workbook is packed with even more practical tools, exercises, and self-reflection prompts.
It's like having your own personal coach guiding you.
Okay, so we've reached the end of our exploration of the habits themselves, but I think there's one more important piece of the puzzle we need to talk about, and that's the idea of character.
Ah, yes. Character, the foundation of true effectiveness.
Welcome back to the show. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people, and I have to say, this has been one enlightening conversation.
It's remarkable how relevant Covey's work remains even today.
Like we said before, it's not about quick fixes or tricks, but about building a solid foundation for a fulfilling life.
And you know, as we've been talking about these habits, I keep coming back to this idea of character.
Oh yeah, totally. It's like woven through all the 7 habits.
It's like Covey is saying, look, true effectiveness isn't just about techniques or strategies. It's about who you are at your core.
It's about integrity, honesty, fairness, all those things.
Right. Those are the building blocks of trust.
And without trust, you can't really have effective relationships, can you?
Exactly. Whether we're talking about personal or professional relationships, trust is the foundation.
So it's about being the kind of person people can rely on, someone who's honest and fair and keeps their promises.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
I love that. It's not just about what you do, but who you are.
And that's what makes Covey's work so powerful. It's not just self-help, it's a philosophy of life.
It's about aligning your actions with your values and principles.
And that's what leads to true fulfillment and lasting success.
Wow, I feel like we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. From paradigms to principles, habits, and even the practical tools from the workbook.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to end here, right?
Absolutely not. This is just the beginning. The real work starts now, putting these principles into practice in our own lives.
So to our listeners, what's one small thing you can do this week? Something specific and actionable to move closer to the person you want to be.
Maybe it's shifting to more proactive language like we talked about,
Or maybe it's finally scheduling some time for those quadrant 2 activities.
or even just practicing empathic listening in your next conversation. Just one small step.
The key is to choose something that resonates with you and commit to it.
Remember, personal growth is a process, not an event. Be patient with yourself and celebrate those small wins along the way.
Well said. And if you're ready to dive even deeper into the 7 habits, we highly recommend checking out the book and the workbook.
It's an investment in yourself that will keep paying dividends for years to come.
All right, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and that you feel empowered to apply these principles in your own lives.
Until next time, keep striving for that private victory that leads to public victory.
And remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So take that step today and start creating the life you want to live.